Hello, and welcome to My Book, a podcast on books and their authors, produced by Cineink, based in London. I'm Loveleen Kacker. In this episode of My Book, I'm going to talk to Dr. Alka Pande, the author of 4 newest books on the Kamasutra.
You know, the minute they think of the Kamasutra, they think of sex. They think of a man standing, doing Shirshasana, having sex with 4 women, fiddling around.
Yes.
And if you talk to anybody and say that you've done work on the Kamasutra, people will suddenly, particularly the opposite sex, will sidle up to me and say, so which is the best position?
Alka is also known as the Queen of Erotica in India. Welcome to the studio, Dr. Alka Pande.
Thank you, Loveleen. Thank you for the warm introduction. And I'm delighted to be here with you in London.
Dr. Alka Pande, the books we are going to talk about today are Yoga and Karma, The Acrobatics of Love, Fresco, Love Under the Sky, The Adulterer and Karma, The Seduction of Illicit Love, and The Nayika and Karma, She Takes Her Pleasure. So, Dr. Alka Pande, Queen of Erotica, how did you get this title?
Well, it's a title which I am quite proud of, actually, because I entered the world of taboo through the Kamasutra. It was more than 23 years ago I was asked and commissioned by Rowley Books to write a book on Indian erotica. You know, we come from quite a patriarchal society in North India, and to have a woman talking or writing about the Kamasutra meant that you yourself were a tramp.
Oh my God.
That you yourself had crossed many boundaries. The good thing was that I was all of 40 carats at that time, and I had crossed the great age of 40. In the beginning, I was rather nervous. I used to feel self-conscious because the minute people heard that I'd done Indian erotica, many eyebrows would be raised, some people would look at me differently. The women started feeling insecure because they thought that I was actually the goddess of love.
I'm not surprised at all, Alka.
And it was very strange. Once I was sitting at an important space in Delhi called the IIC, the India International Centre, and I was talking to a colleague in the lounge, and I see a man making all kinds of faces at me. And I was wondering, why was he looking like that? Till I realized that I had a set of Kamasutras which I was researching on my lap. And slowly over a period of time, I got a lot more commissions to write on the Kamasutra. I have written a Kamasutra for women. I've written The Quest for Love. I've written an introduction for an important Kamasutra by Rowley Books. So slowly over the years, I became associated with the Kamasutra, and I really don't know where this title suddenly came from. And one day I was introduced, oh, here comes the Queen of Erotica.
Is the Kamasutra a compendium of acrobatic sexual positions? Or is it a guide to orgiastic excesses and the delights which a man tries to give to 3 women equally at the same time? Is it the book on same-sex love? Or is it a book on aphrodisiacs? What is the Kamasutra?
So, you know, Loveleen, you have posed a lot of questions, and I will say the Kamasutra is all that and much more. The Kamasutra for me really is a book of a life well lived, a life of pleasure, a life where desire is there. It's basically a book which talks about the 4 purusharths of life.
Right.
It talks of dharma, which is an ethical way of living, that makes life so beautiful. It talks of artha. It does not decry a person making money, how important it is to have a good life. And then it is about karma. How can you go through life if you are not sexually gratified? Because this is one of the ways of life. I mean, you know, the birds and the bees do it. Why should not the humans do it? And the best thing about the Indian way is that it is really about a celebration of pleasure, of vilas, of sexual gratification, of embrace. There are different kinds of alingans, different kinds of embraces which are mentioned in the Kamasutra.
So what you're saying here, Alka...
And finally, it's about moksha.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is what are generally described as the 4 pillars. Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. And to give Kama lesser importance than Artha or Dharma would be not the right thing to do. Is this a kind of a dichotomy or a dilemma that you see in society today?
I really don't like going back to the ancient past, because a lot of us love to say in India, oh, we were so fantastic in pre-modern India. Oh, we were so evolved. Oh, our Upanishads are the great. But I would just like to say that I do believe a lot in traditional Indic wisdom. And I think somewhere we got it right. We felt that there has to be a judicious balance between all the 4 pillars. If you're too dharmic, then you become
a sannyasi.
Sannyasi. You
Right.
go into the mountains, you live in isolation. If it's too much artha, too much money, then you become a merchant.
Yes,
You
that's
buy
all you think
everything.
about.
If there's too much karma, you become Bacchus, you become a hedon, you are just succumbing to pleasure. And if you don't balance all these 3, how do you transcend? Transcendence is very important, and a balance between all 3. And you see it around in your life every day, even today. The Kama Sutra really becomes a text for a great way of living. And the sad thing, what I feel, that people, the minute they think of the Kama Sutra, they think of sex. They think of a man standing, doing Shirshasana, having sex with 4 women,
Yes,
fiddling around.
Yes.
And if you talk to anybody and say that you've done work on the Kama Sutra, people will suddenly, particularly the opposite sex, will sidle up to me and say, so which is the best position?
Yes, but I understand what you're trying to say. What you're also adding here is that the Kama is not necessarily just about the physical act of coupling. It is more about even moonlight, flowers, about the pleasure of being in each other's company, of good food. There could be many other things that create an environment that adds a satisfaction to your life. Would you not say that Kama goes beyond physical coupling?
I love my mythology. I love Indian mythology. And I don't go back to it like a story. I like to think of mythology as something which is allusional, which is an allegory, which actually is also symbolic.
Yeah.
It teaches you something. So I want to really at this point tell you a lovely story about Kama.
Yes, that would be wonderful.
So, Kama, as you know, is the god of love. He's akin to Cupid. And within the Indian structure, we actually celebrate pleasure. Every god has a wife,
Yes.
or a consort, and lovemaking is accepted. And the Kama Sutra, one of the stories of the Kama Sutra is that it came, Nandi heard the sounds of the lovemaking of Shiva and Parvati, who are the primordial parents, and then Vatsyayana kind of collated all that. But that aside, I don't want to go into the religiosity of it. But the story is that Shiva was once in deep, deep meditation, and it was felt by the gods that there was a demon called Tarakasura, and he had to be destroyed.
Right.
And only the son of Shiva could destroy him. So the gods went to Kama.
Okay.
You have to destroy the tapasya of Shiva. So Kama said that, look, why are you asking me to do this? They said, no, you have to help us. So Kama created an unnatural spring, primavera, which is the time of love, which is a time of regeneration, of rebirth, and lots of things. And with his bow made of sugarcane arrows and the 5 flowers, he kind of shot it at Shiva. Shiva opened his eyes. He was livid with rage and destroyed him completely to ashes. So his wife goes to Shiva, Rati, and says, how could you do this? He had come with such a worthy cause. He had come to save the devas and the good people from the demon. So Shiva was always a man with also a conscience and a heart. And he said, but I have done that. Now I can't help you. But I can do one thing. He will be immortal. He will live. Kama will live without a body.
Right. That's why Kama doesn't have a body.
So he is Ananga.
Yes.
He is Atanu. without a tana.
Yes.
But he will always live in the minds
of
people.
everybody. Yes. What a wonderful story.
So today you see, sex is in the mind of everybody.
I mean, I cannot deny anything you say, Alka.
Yeah. Young, old, same sex. I mean, today what are the LGBTQs fighting for?
Right.
For sexual freedom.
Yes, absolutely.
So what you see, and what I love about the Kamasutra, it's actually a text of a good life, a very inclusive text. It includes same-sex love, it includes courtesans, it includes aphrodisiacs, it includes all the arts, the 64 arts, from archery.
Kala Sampann.
Bilkul.
So thank you for that. That was a wonderful story that you related. There's an interesting question that I would like to raise. I mean, why is the Kama Sutra taboo? You did use this word yourself. And people would have started equating it to pornography. How are pornography and Kama Sutra different?
You know, Loveleen, I would say it stems out of ignorance.
Right.
People have not read the Kama Sutra. I'm talking of contemporary modern times. You've had so many illustrated Kama Sutras. And what do the illustrations do? They only focus on book 2. The Kama Sutra actually consists of 7 books which have been collected over a period of time through different sages, through different wise people. And Vatsyayana just collated them.
Yeah.
He did not write it. And you see, the first book is about dharma, the second book is about sexual union, the third is about wooing a wife, the fourth is about marriage, the fifth is, strangely, how do you seduce another man's wife?
That's absolutely wonderful. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people would like to read that book.
And book 6 is all about courtesans.
Courtesans, yes. That's a very interesting part of the Kama Sutra.
I love that book.
Yeah.
Because it shows such a strong empowerment of women.
Yes.
The courtesan had her own place in society. She was not looked down upon.
Yes.
Lots of important decisions were done in her home, very different to the geishas of Japan, where they were all subordinated to men. Here the woman held her own. She talked to men, she knew archery, she knew the art of politics, she was so well aware. There are some chapters in the book on courtesans. It is, how do you milk a wealthy lover? How do you get rid of an unwanted lover? Don't we want to know
this? Don't we all want to know this?
So I think book 6 is a very, very empowering book for women. And it's as relevant today as it was then.
I'll bring you back to this question of interpersonal power relationship between men and women. From your book, what I find, and I can quote, is that man seems to be the initiator. He sets up the scene, perfects his technique, seduces the virgin, marries her, and when bored with his wife, he goes to the courtesan. And finally, an aging man resorts to aphrodisiacs and magic spells to retain his prowess. So the question emerges, what role do women have here? Are women totally unempowered in this game?
You know, as a contemporary and luckily very empowered woman, the way I look at it, I see the woman is the base of everything. The man may go for aphrodisiacs. Why is he doing that? For the woman, right? Who is he seducing? The virgin. The central focal point of a man's gaze and desire is the woman. And I think the woman is central to everything. The woman is the Shakti. The woman is the power. And I'm not saying it as a feminist, but I'm talking of the supremacy of the eternal feminine. It is the woman who is the nurturer. It is the woman who bears the children. And in the Kama Sutra, it is said that a woman's desire, and even in the Mahabharata, it is said that the woman's pleasure and desire is absolutely unequal to that of a male. It's even much higher.
Yes, that's a wonderful thing we would all love to hear. And I understand what the position that you're taking here. But I'm trying to contextualize it a little bit more. What I'm trying to say is that when, in the subcontinent particularly, you hear of sex being used as a way of inflicting violence on women, of taking revenge. I mean, there are stories that we hear about all the time. And added to that, marital rape I mean, it's as late as 1991 that Britain also decided to, criminalize marital rape. So, after all, the whole concept is of she can be violated, he can't. She can be shamed, he can't. A man can strut around after, being with the woman, whereas the woman has to hide her face and, go down the street without making sure that anybody has noticed her. So, where is this power game being fit into this narrative that you're talking about?
So I think it's a lot to do with patriarchy.
Right.
And these are all patriarchal tropes that you have talked about. In war, the biggest thing is of taking the woman away. I mean, I saw a wonderful exhibition called Resilience just now, not even 2 weeks ago, by World Press Photography. And there's a thing in one of the countries of Africa where there is breast ironing happening even today.
Right.
The mothers are ironing the breasts of their daughters, which is such a painful process, so that she's not attractive to men and she is not raped and violated. Now, this is the basic or the baser aspect of man as hunter, predator. And these are things which are very much, we can't really wipe them and sweep them under the carpet. But what I'm saying is that the role and the whole representation of women is changing to a large extent. And I think it's also to do a lot with physical strength. The man is physically stronger than
a woman.
A woman. And how can he shame her? Woman is equally bright. She's equally intelligent. She's equal, more than an equal in every way. So the only way that he can actually show his power or patriarchy is through
violence. It is.
Violence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And this is a cause which is there in almost every part of the world. I will not just say the subcontinent. You think there's no marital rape in America? They're also fighting for the same thing. You think there's no marital rape here in the UK? You think there's no... In fact, in the UK, if you look at figures, there's much more because there's so many marriages. And stepfathers, there's many more stepfathers here in the Western societies than in the subcontinent.
Right.
And there's much more. But having said that, I think it is now up to the evolvement of society. And I think men need to be liberated more than women.
Welcome back. I'm in conversation with Dr. Alka Pande, the author of a set of 4 books on the Kamasutra, published by Speaking Tiger Books. The books are available on Amazon and other platforms. Alka is an art historian and a curator who has received a number of awards from countries like France, Australia, and India for all her contributions in the field of art and literature. She is the director of the Visual Arts Gallery in the Habitat Centre, New Delhi, and has also set up museums across the country. Alka is a prolific writer, and some of her prominent books are Body Sutra, Panchatattvas, Road Ahead, Shringara, Many Faces of Indian Beauty, Leela, an erotic play of verse and art, the New Age Kamasutra for women, Ardhanareshwara and the Androgyne, Probing the Gender Within, and many more than I can even enumerate here. So when women talk about freedom, they actually want freedom also from sexual repression. So can a woman not say that she wants sex, for example? Can she not go up to a man and say she finds him attractive? But if a woman does that, then society all over again turns around and exploits such a woman. She is seen as the predator role becomes opposite. She's called a slut or all kinds of ugly names. So one wonders, was ancient Indian woman freer than her sister today?
Well, as I said, I don't want to go back to our hoary past, but I do think a pre-modern Indian woman was definitely more empowered.
More empowered.
And sexually, more so. Because if you look at the chapter on courtesans, she's respected.
Yes.
And in the Kautilya's Arthashastra, the world's oldest profession was paying taxes. The so-called, what you call them, prostitutes, they were paying taxes. It was
a recognized profession.
It was a regulated, recognized profession.
Right.
There was a need, and they also they have the power to say no.
Right.
It's not like what you say about pornography today. What is pornography? It is again, where does the work become a celebration of the erotic and where does it become pornography? Where there is control over the woman.
Exactly.
But if the woman and the man
are equally empowered,
so it is about
it
pleasure.
is love then, it's pleasure. Yes, wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, there's one other very interesting question that has come up again and again, and that is this question of sex love. I mean, Hindu mythology is replete with examples. Some you see even temple architecture there. Cross-dressing, for example, was not unheard of in the courts of Awadh. Wajid Ali Shah himself dressed as a woman, and where did our society suddenly look upon same-sex as a crime? How did that happen? Did the British criminalize it?
So, people in my country love to say, oh, it was the coming of the Muslims, it was coming with the Mughals. But the maximum number of pleasure albums, the whole thing of the courtesan, it was so much. The Mughals were a really pleasure-loving lot. In fact, I think that the British Victorian prudery was to some extent, though it was happening in India, it was continuing the parda, the repeated invasions. But I think it was that when piano legs started being covered, sandwiches being covered. If you look at the history of sexuality by Michel Foucault, you see all that. And then, there's always a context, and I'm not a person who likes to judge people today for what their forefathers did. But if you look at the English when they ruled India with their stiff upper lip and looked at, the natives as uncultured, they are the ones who gave us a patronym. In their tribes of India, they made people sit down and, exoticize them. They have also done a lot. And all these hardened kind of laws, they were set up by the British, not by the Indians at all.
Yeah, right. So just to, set the context right, that it was the British that first made homosexuality a crime in 1860, which was decriminalized quite recently, I think about 7 or 8 years back, after a landmark court judgment where the IPC was then changed. But now recently we are looking again at a case which is in the courts where same-sex love has been decriminalized, but same-sex marriage is being opposed by the government. They feel that the concept of marriage is for a man, a woman, and a child. And in the case of a same-sex marriages, it doesn't seem to fit the desired description of what a family should be. So are we, it's one step forward and 2 steps backwards, literally.
I think it's going to take time because changing the mindset through culture takes time.
The other thing very interesting that has come up is that the Kamasutra was written as far back as the 4th century by Vatsyayana, who was himself a celibate sage. But for a long time, I'm sure in texts and other things it was there. But the world had never heard of the Kamasutra till it was actually translated into English and published as late as 1962 for the Western world. After which the Western world seems to have adopted it, and we, who actually have all this erotic culture and sculptures and everything, seems to have gone back to a very regressive state.
I think after yoga, we need to give the world the Kamasutra.
We have given it, I think. I don't know whether you...
We need to explain to them that it is not a taboo. They should read it. And that's why lots of people are writing on the aesthetics of the erotic, a lot more of Sanskrit poetry. You see Bhartrihari, you see Bhasha. So much of the beauty of the celebration of life is given in them. And the Kama Sutra was actually the mother of all erotic art. After that we had the Rati Rahasya, we had Koka Shastra. It led to so many pleasure albums being done. And I think that over a period of time, with more and more people writing about the Kama Sutra, people will understand what a wealth of information the Kama Sutra is towards a refined life. It's about refinement.
On this note, Alka, can I ask you to read from your book a passage that would be wonderful?
Thank you. I'm going to actually read from one of my small little gems. They're like chocolates, these little...
Chocolate is an aphrodisiac too.
So therefore, I use that. It's from my book, Al Fresco Kama, Love Under the Open Sky, which Speaking Tiger published. And I want to talk about the fact that how the Indians appreciated every aspect of life, from the beautiful architecture they made. We are a very sensual civilization. Yeah. There is sensuality everywhere, from buildings to pleasure homes. So here I'm talking of the art. I'm going to read a little 2 paragraphs from this book, which says, the art and architecture of pre-modern India, particularly of the upper classes, were marked by unapologetic opulence and eroticism. Vatsyayana mentions aesthetic love chambers in the yard or garden of the Nagaraka, the man about town, where his mistresses and courtesans were invited to be. In Sanskrit poetry, the Dola Griha, the garden space with a swing, is best suited for refined and unhurried rituals of pleasure. The town garden, known as the Nagaro Upavan, was the ideal setting for lovers' trysts. Its features prominently in the work of preeminent Sanskrit poet Kalidas. His Nagara Upavan is elaborately laid out with water tanks, arbors of flowering creepers, swings and stone benches, and posts for tame peacocks. In his epic poem, Raghuvamsa, the royal couple Aja and Indumati make love in a garden which is adorned with special pavilion for love sports. Another king has sexual encounters with his female attendants in a verdant bower. Manno Ullasa, literally meaning delighter of the mind, is a 12th century encyclopedic treatise from southern India which describes, with reference to Kalidas, a secret chamber called Gudamohana Nagarika. It was constructed in a garden at the level of water, like a sunken courtyard or basement, and was meant for Kama Bhoga, or carnal pleasure. So you see that it is accepted that men had mistresses.
We'll reserve the discussion of courtesan versus wife for another time, Alka. That's a tricky one. So coming to another aspect of your life, Alka, before you built this enormous body of work which we have been talking about, of books, of your museums, of the visual arts gallery that you run, you were also a radio presenter. How was that experience?
Oh God, you've taken me back to another life. In fact, I've almost forgotten about it. I would say that it was all about my youth. I came from a family where my father was, it's very politically incorrect to say, but he was quite a fascist. I was the eldest of 4 daughters, and we were made to feel that, you have to either become a doctor or an engineer.
Tell me about it.
Or join the civil service. I didn't do any of that. I learnt dance from Bharatanatyam. My mother was a trained singer of the Gwalior Gharana, so I grew up with the sound of Riyaz. And I was, I don't think you'll even believe it, but I was a national player for basketball.
Really?
Yeah. And then...
This side of you I never knew.
Yeah, Loveleen. You only see me as this person who's very serious and all that. But I was actually quite wild and untamed. But I had a very strong mother, and she stood with me. I made a biggest mistake in taking up economic honors in college in Delhi University, because in my time, if you were bright, you had to do eco honors. So that was the biggest mistake I made, and I did fairly badly in my college. Nobody who knew me in Delhi University, Loveleen, would imagine. They keep asking me, what happened from being the president of my college to being a debater to being, I was acting with Marcus Murch. I did all that. Where was this sudden persona? So there was a period of 4 years in my life where soon after my BA, where my father told me, "Itne kharab marks. You've done so badly, you should actually go drown yourself.
My father would have said, chole becho.
My father was no better. He said, you should drown yourself. So then I started working in radio. I started because after your BA, you could work for the Delhi station. I started doing double duties. I would do Delhi station,
Right.
Delhi B during the day, do the general overseas service at night. And in those days, in 78, 79, getting almost 800-900 rupees was a lot of money, making features for the general overseas service. And I really enjoyed
That
myself.
must have been really an extraordinary experience. Would you like to share any snippets that you remember? Anything, any special anecdote?
Well, the best was that we didn't have all these schools of mass comm. I had to go and train under Ramu Damodaran and first learn how to switch and say, this is the Delhi station of All India Radio. It was heady. It was like wine. Doing commercial broadcasts, going to broadcasting studios. It was another world. And I felt that, I was a star.
Yes, of course, you were and you still are.
But my father, who was in the government, got transferred to Bombay. And then I realized even his peon is a BA. I said, oh my God, now this will not work. But having said that, I was doing voicing for, Russian films in English, making a lot of money. But I realized, I have to go back to academia. After 3-year break, I went back. I changed my subject. I did history.
Right.
I did very well from Kalina campus. Then I get married and I wanted to do my PhD in history. But then they said, Bombay University, is there a recognition? So I changed my subject and I did it in history of art, which nobody knew. People, if I tell them, I'm in the Department of Fine Arts, they'd say, finance. People didn't know 40 years ago what the history of art was. It was set up by Mulk Raj Anand in Punjab University, and that was a turning point. Because when I got married to my husband, who was working for the government, I went to this one-horse town called Chandigarh. I was catapulted from Bombay. I go to Chandigarh. I knew nobody but my husband. So what did I do? I got so immersed into my subject. I got a new career as a journalist. I got a column with the Indian Express. And for 10 years, for the Tribune, I was the music and dance critic. And I just grew and grew and grew. And I got so involved. There was no radio. There was no television in Chandigarh. So what do? I write and read. And then I did my PhD. In fact, nobody can believe. After that, I became the head of my department. And I get an award, the Charles Wallace Award, and I go to do my postdoc and I come here to London. So my life was a series of accidents.
No, I think it is a marvelous trajectory and very, very praiseworthy.
And everything what I did, the only thing which I think, and I call it Narayan Kripa, whatever I did, I had such a zest for life, Loveleen, that I embraced it. So when I went into academia, I went into it with my heart.
Heart and soul. I've seen you work, Alka. I know how you do things.
So, Loveleen, all what I feel is if you have the passion for life, everything
falls into place. Absolutely. And on that wonderful note, I would like to thank you, Alka, for your insights into the complex question of the Kamasutra, gender and sexuality. You have been listening to a conversation with Alka Pande, author of 4 books on the Kamasutra: Yoga and Calm, The Acrobatics of Love; Fresco, Love Under the Open Sky; The Adulterer and Karma, The Seduction of Illicit Love; and The Nayika and Karma, She Takes Her Pleasure. These books have been published by Speaking Tiger Publications and are available on Amazon Books and other outlets. I hope you enjoyed listening to this podcast. We would love to hear from you, and if you have any feedback or any question, please do write to us at post@cineinc.com. post@cineinc.com. In our next episode of My Book, we will be back with another author and another book. This podcast has been produced by Achla Sharma and Parvez Alam for Cineink. To listen to other episodes of My Book, you can visit the Cineinck website www.cineinc.com. Cineink podcasts are available on Apple, Spotify, Google Podcast, and YouTube. Thank you for listening to this podcast by Cineink. Until we meet again, this is Loveleen Kacker. Goodbye.